Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Water Prairie Chronicles. We're glad that you joined us today. And we have a special guest with us. Ed McDaniel is here. And I met Ed through his niece, Kristen, indirectly. If you remember, a few weeks ago, we were at the North Carolina State Fair Accessibility Day. And during that event, I met Kristen. And Kristen got us connected after that event was over. And Ed reached out to me to talk about his guide dog. And I think you're going to enjoy hearing his story today. So Ed, welcome to the Water Prairie Chronicles.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Before we go very deeply, I always like to have my guests introduce themselves. So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I have what's called Usher syndrome 2A, which means that I've been hard of hearing since birth and have an eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa. So for most of my life, I've very gradually been losing my vision. At this point, my acuity is still pretty good, but my visual field is below 5 degrees, where most people see 180. Mine is below 5 degrees. I'm a psychologist. I worked with children and adults with disabilities for many years. Not currently working, but am going to be starting to work again in January.
Are you going into the schools, or are you going in private practice? Or
I'm transitioning into private practice. So I kind of taken some time off to kind of make that transition. I worked for the state of North Carolina for 30 years, and then for 5 years I worked for a nonprofit, and also worked part-time for the state after I retired. And then almost 2 years ago, I stopped working as I moved back to my hometown, and have been kind of transitioning to working in a private practice.
You're listening to the Water Prairie Chronicles, a podcast that supports parents of children with disabilities by sharing the stories of individuals who have grown up with disabilities and the organizations available to help parents along the way. Stay connected with us by clicking the subscribe button and leave us a comment if you want to join in on the conversation. So today we're going to be talking more about the guide dog. Now, you said that you first got your guide dog, a year ago? Was it in December?
It was December of last year. Almost a year ago.
And so I've kind of broken up our interview into some sections. And so just so our listeners kind of know where we're going with this, I wanted to look at some basic information just about guide dogs in general first, because some of our listeners have young children. They may not have thought about this yet, and it might be something down the road for them to consider. And then others may have an older son or daughter who's going to be looking into this type of tool in the near future. And so I figured we'd start with that, and then we'll move into some more personal experience of what you've learned over the last year. So first of all, what exactly is a guide dog, and what's the difference between a guide dog and a service dog?
A guide dog is specifically trained to help people with blindness or vision loss navigate. A service dog is broader and includes a variety of disabilities, where a dog is trained to perform a specific task for someone. Like, for example, for someone who is deaf, the dog would alert them to certain sounds like a doorbell or things like that. There's a whole variety of service dogs, but guide dogs are specific to people who are blind. Because
you're dealing with both deafness and blindness, is your dog trained in both, or just a guide dog?
Just a guide dog. With my hearing loss, being hard of hearing, there are some people who get dogs who are trained in different areas depending on if they have multiple disabilities. In my case, my dog is a guide dog, and she is not trained for other tasks related to my hearing loss.
Okay, I hadn't really thought about that before you mentioned that. That I guess it would be a possibility to have a dog that's trained in multiple areas.
Yes.
So you've already answered my next question, which was whether you have to be blind to have a guide dog. But specifically, is there a level of vision loss that you have to qualify for a guide dog?
Yes, most programs require that you be legally blind. Some states, I think, maybe have some variation, and some schools may have some variation in where what's considered legally blind. In my case, as I mentioned, I'm legally blind through my visual field. If you have a visual field of less than 20 degrees, you're considered legally blind. So that's how I qualified.
So so it's not necessarily the acuity, but it's either the acuity or the range, the field
Yeah,
range.
and it could be both. Yeah.
Okay. Because you are not legally blind as far as acuity goes, why did you want to get a guide dog?
The main reason was for safety. With my type of vision loss, I'm mostly impacted with my mobility. Because I have good acuity, I can still read and recognize people at this point. Although I know that's going to change. I have two older brothers with Usher syndrome also, and I can kind of, by watching them, I can kind of see what my future holds as far as my vision. And my oldest brother doesn't have any real functional vision left, and my middle brother is kind of in between us. The main reason was for safety and also more confidence. Because of my lack of visual field, I bump into things if I don't use a cane or a guide dog, and crossing the street, being around traffic. Also, with my hearing loss, that makes it more difficult for me to hear what's around me. So a dog is able to see and hear things that I'm not aware of for my safety.
For a guide dog, what do you have to do to qualify for one? Now, the vision loss would be one of them,
Hmm.
but are there other qualifications?
For the school that I went to, you have to be at least 16 years old. Different schools have different requirements. You also have to be active. You have to be able to care for a dog. So, they want to make sure that, you're going to use a dog regularly with the type of work or school or what you're doing, and that you are physically active to be able to walk regularly with the dog.
Are there things that you did to prepare to get your guide dog?
Well, with the application process and kind of preparing, that was kind of really the first step was, I had to provide a lot of information to the guide dog school about my vision loss, my health, my pace. That's one of the things that they look at is your walking pace. I had to share information about, my environment. I had to do some videos of me navigating. And one of the things I didn't mention that is a requirement is orientation and mobility training. You have to have already had O&M training. So you have to be able to use a cane and navigate independently before you can qualify to get a guide dog.
And are there so you're providing a video of your environment? You're giving them feedback as far as what your day-to-day routine is, I would think, as part of that.
Hmm. Right.
So do they use that information to help choose the dog that you will
Yes.
work with?
Yeah, they spend a lot of time making sure it's the right match. With the person's personality, how they're going to use the dog, and the dog, you know, itself. They evaluate the dog, and they evaluate the applicant, and they try to make the best match.
How long did you have to wait from when you first applied?
I applied in November of 2020. My application was accepted in February of 2021. So I had to wait a few months through the application process before I was accepted. And then I got the call in November of 2021 and started the training in December. So it was a little more than a year from the time I started the application to the time that I got my guide dog.
Do you think that's typical, or do you think any of that was delayed because of COVID?
It was a little delayed. They had told me when I started the application it might be 12 to 18 months.
Oh, okay.
Um, so, which was, a little longer. Because of the pandemic, there was a short period of time where um, they didn't have anyone coming in due to COVID. Uh, but mostly what they did was they decreased the class sizes, and they also decreased the length of training from 3 weeks to 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the fact that you're in the pandemic and the training that you'd have to do would have to be in person. Speaking of that, what type of training did you have?
It was pretty intensive training over 2 weeks. First, they just kind of start out even without a dog, and they actually have one of the instructors hold the harness, and you kind of walk with them. So you even
Okay.
start without a dog, but then um, they pretty quickly you know get you matched with a dog. They have a dog in mind when you come, but they still are evaluating you when you come to make sure it's still the best match. So, you know, looking back, I'm thinking through that whole process. There were so many things that we did in that 2 weeks, but we were in a variety of settings. We were like in a residential neighborhood. We went to a small town. We went to a larger city. So they put us in different environments. We did nighttime training. We went to a mall. We got on a bus. We got on escalators, elevators. And, we had our dogs with us. After the first day, we had our dogs with us all the time. The dogs stayed with us in our rooms, and they accompanied us to our meals and were with us all the time after that first day.
So the first day was when you had the trainer with you as if you had the dog, but it was just the harness that you were using.
Right. We were
Okay.
introduced to the dogs that first day, but we didn't know, we weren't told for sure if that was the match because they were still evaluating. And as it turned out, the dog that I first started with was the dog they matched me with. And part of that too was I entered a specific program for running guides. I'm a runner, and
Okay.
this guide dog school, which is Guiding Eyes for the Blind, is the only guide dog school that trains guide dogs to run with blind people.
Does insurance help pay for a guide dog?
The guide dog school that I went to, and I think this is true of most of them, it's all paid for through donations, which is really quite incredible when you consider how much it cost. And I'm talking about not just the training, but everything. They pay for your transportation. They pay for your the food and of course where you're staying. They also provide follow up after you get your dog, and they also have a fund for vet expenses. So everything is paid for, and it uh, Guiding Eyes for the Blind says that it costs about $50,000 a year to train a dog, and it takes up to 3 years to train a dog. And it's quite amazing when you consider, how much money and how many dogs a year they train and match with people. And they were very accommodating, as well. When they called me in November of last year and told me they had a match and asked if I could come in December, I had already signed up to run a marathon in California, and it just so happened that was the day before the class was going to start. And I said, "Well, can you fly me from California to New York?" And they said, sure. So, and they made all the arrangements for the flights, and it was all paid for. And it's amazing how accommodating they are.
Is there now you had the 2 weeks, typically be a 3 week training when you first are getting your dog. Is there follow-up training that you'll do over the years, or is that a one-time training?
It's a one-time training, but if you are, having any issues, you can call the guide dog school, and I've done that where I've called my instructor and talked with her. They do have people who, like in different regions of the country, will come out and reassess and provide additional training if that's needed. So it's just on a as needed basis.
All right, so let's get into your dog. I keep talking about guide dog generically, but what is your dog's name?
Her name is Serena. It's spelled Serina.
And do you have a photo you can share with us?
Do you want me to bring her in here?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
She's just in this room over here.
Okay.
When I'm doing a video call or a phone call, I sometimes don't have her in the room with me because when I'm talking, she thinks I'm talking to her and she wants to play.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, I've got her in the next room, and I think you'll be able to see her when she comes in. Yeah. So can you see her?
Yeah, there she is. Hi, Serena.
So this is her.
She's now how old is she now?
She is 3 years old.
Okay. And it is playtime.
Yeah, so she hears me talking. She doesn't realize I'm talking to you. She thinks I'm talking to her.
Right.
So she's ready to play with me since I'm talking to her. So yeah, she's very playful. She's very active. She's a lot of fun. She's very social and friendly. She's just a lot of fun to be around.
Does she understand when it's time to work and when it's time to play?
Mostly. That's something that we have to work on sometimes. Or do you want to see her anymore? Can I put her back? Or
Yeah. It's probably easier if you go ahead and let her leave.
Okay. All right. Come on. Let's go. Come on.
She looks so dejected.
She wants to be with me all the time, and I love that about her. She's just so social, and I feel bad when I have to leave her sometimes.
Just the way she was walking out the door there.
Yeah, she'd
Like,
much rather
you
be in here.
just brought me.
Yeah, she'd much rather be in here with me. And most of the time when I'm in my office, she's in here with me. But like I said, when I'm on the phone, and she'll go and get one of her squeaky toys and come in here and all the squeaking going on, and it's hard to hear, and then she'll want to get kind of be close to me because, like I said, she thinks I'm talking to her.
I ask about the work and the play part. I've always been told that, like, if they wear the harness, that they're
Right.
working. When they don't wear the harness,
That's
they're
true.
playing.
That is
But
true.
she's 3 years old. Does she understand that yet, or is she still?
Yeah, for the most part, she, because she's, I think, a running guide, she probably has more energy than most guide dogs. So she's easily excited, probably more than most guide dogs. She just has a lot of energy. She does really well when we are moving and she is guiding me. She actually does the best in challenging situations, like, for example, in an airport where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of activity. She's just kind of in her element when she's in a high demand situation like an airport. Or recently I went back to the town where I had been living before I got her, where I had done a lot of hiking, and took her on pretty challenging hike, and she was really focused and enjoyed that. So it's kind of in low demand situations where, if I am with, a group of friends or family, and she's not really having to guide me, and we're just kind of standing around talking, that's where she, even sometimes when she's in harness, she wants to play, she wants to be social. So that's kind of hard. But we're working on that. I'm hoping, as she gets older, she'll mellow out. I think she will. But that's one of the challenges with her. But it's a part of her that I really like as well, because she is a lot of fun and she's very social.
Also thinking she's 3 years old. For a dog, she's still in her puppy stages
Yeah,
too.
she is. She is for sure.
So you talked about the airport, you talked about hiking, about running. Have you had any trouble going anywhere with her yet?
I have not, fortunately. I'm waiting for that time to come because I have heard stories and I've known people that have had issues, and it seemed to happen more frequently with the ride shares like Uber or Lyft, where
Oh,
people
right.
have their personal cars. Sometimes they don't want a dog in their car, and I've heard that, and also sometimes in restaurants and stores. But I have not had any issues, and I've been, like I said, I've been on airplanes, I've been on trains, buses, I've been to doctor's appointment, dental appointments, the barbershop, restaurants, stores, you know, um, all kinds of places, and I've not had any issues. Uh, you know, I, it may happen one day, but so far it hasn't.
Do you have any trouble if you're around other dogs? Like, what does she do?
If we are moving, and she's pretty focused with guiding me, we haven't had any issues, and actually we, particularly when we're running, like if we're running like in a park area, like on a greenway. There have been times where other dogs have growled and barked at her and
Right.
been aggressive, and she will look at them, but she'll just keep going. So she's really good with that. There have been times where we have been running, and a dog without their owner who's unleashed will run up to us, and she's very friendly and very social. So she really, when dogs have approached us that way without an owner close by, she's so friendly. She really kind of de-escalates the situation. She's not afraid of aggressive dogs. Um, she just wags her tail, and it seems like they calm down, and then usually the owner comes running out there to get their dog, and so she's done really well with that. When I've had like friends or family with their dogs, she's kind of over the top excited to play with other dogs. She loves being with other dogs. So when she's not guiding me in a situation like that, she gets a little crazy.
And it's one of those things that I always wondered, because you always see dogs, like my son used to do dog walking in the neighborhood here, and so I would go with him, and yet every dog in a yard anywhere would come out, barking and howling at the corner of
Uh,
their yard,
mhm.
and I wondered, with you being out and running and all, if you would run into much of that.
It hasn't been a problem. Even with like squirrels and cats, and she does really well. Like I said, particularly if we're moving, she stays focused. If I were just standing around, that would be a little different. Although I've been, in outside of my yard, and we're just sitting there, and cats would walk by, and she just watches them go by, and we've seen, you know, like a possum, some other animals like that in the neighborhood, and she's curious. She looks, but she doesn't go after them.
I'm sure as they're evaluating these puppies, even they're looking at that type of personality too.
Definitely, definitely. There's a very intensive evaluation process with dogs, from a very young age, and to make sure they're well suited. I mean, even before that, with the breeding of the dogs, but they're evaluating them from a very young age. And you know, some dogs aren't cut out to be guide dogs, and they may go into other areas, like they may work with police departments or
Right.
you know, other types of service dogs, emotional support dogs, or you know, some dogs, if they aren't suited for any of those, just are adopted out to families.
Getting into the details of working with a guide dog,
Hmm.
how does she know where to go?
I have to tell her where to go. Most people don't realize that. They think the dog is, you know, there are some situations where, you know, if you tell a dog to find something, they're doing the guiding as far as leading. But basically, what happens, like when you're navigating a street, you're on the sidewalk, is that the dog travels in a straight line, and they will continue straight until you tell it to turn. So, um, you know, I give her certain commands like forward, which means obviously to go forward. And I will say, and she will go like point to point, and she will go, I'll say to the curb. And so she will walk until we get to the next curb and then stop. And then I will either tell her to go left, right, or forward once we get to that, like an intersection. Um, and, you know, other commands that I use are like wait. But, you know, you can, you know, like when I go to a store, I'll say to the door, you know. Um, you know, so she can find certain things, and you know, you can train your dog to, you know, find elevators and things like that. But for the most part, you are the one, you know, particularly in traffic, you are the one that tells the dog when to go and cross the intersection. Um, so you have to know when to cross based on the traffic pattern and the sounds of the cars going by. The dog will do, like if you start to cross an intersection and there's a car coming, it will do what they call intelligent disobedience, where the dog will stop
Okay.
and disobey you for safety reasons. And they actually practice that in the training. And actually, it happened one time when I was we were in a larger city, White Plains, New York, in a very busy traffic downtown area, and we were, you know, partway through a crosswalk, and a car came behind us and then turned, you know, past us and turned right in front of us, and we, you know, she stopped, and but then they did that with the instructors when we were in the smaller town. It was Yorktown, uh, uh, New York, and the one of the instructors came in a car, and they told us, you know, at some point this would happen. I didn't know when, but they did that where the car crossed in the intersection that we were in, and the dog stopped.
So, other than just stopping, are there other signals that she gives you, or is that pretty much the main way that she's telling you something different?
Yeah. Well, you know, let's say if there's not a sidewalk, she is trained to stay to the curb to the left. Like if you're in a residential neighborhood that doesn't have sidewalks, she
Right.
will stay to the left. You know, I hold her harness with my left hand, so she's going to stay to the left, and so, so in that instance, you know, like if I'm going through my neighborhood and the, you know, street curves, she's going to stay to the curb. Um,
Right.
but she'll continue until I tell her to, and the command is to wait, and she'll stop.
Are there any obstacles that are more difficult to navigate around?
You know, construction areas can be more
Oh
challenging
yeah.
because, you know, depending on the barricades and things like that, how things are set up, you know, it can be a little more challenging to figure out how to get around. You know, if the sidewalk ends and you have to cross the street to get around a construction area, uh, that's a little more challenging.
How do you handle like I'm thinking about I live near Raleigh, and there's some older neighborhoods in downtown Raleigh that have like really bad broken sidewalks,
Hmm.
and they have some stairs going from the road up to a more level sidewalk. They're a little bit harder to navigate even with a cane. That type of situation, is that easier with a dog, or is it just as difficult?
Yeah, for me, I found that's easier with a dog than with a cane because with a cane, the tip of the cane gets caught up on cracks in the sidewalk
Right.
and all. So I've found it's easier with a dog, and she will. I will tell her, to go to the curb or to the stairs, you know, and she'll stop and at the edge, and then I'll tell her forward again. So that's kind of how that works.
So on the just speak just thinking about cracks in the sidewalk and all, so you get
Mhm.
those older cracked ones, or maybe you've got a tree root coming up on a regular sidewalk. With the cane, even though it may get hung up on it, you're going to feel where that changes.
Hmm.
How does she let you know, like if there's a deviation in a smooth sidewalk?
Yeah, if it's, depending on how substantial it is, she will go around it. But I've not had
Oh,
any
okay.
issues with that. If it's kind of subtle, she'll just walk. And there have been some times where a sidewalk is uneven. I'll trip a little bit, but, I'm holding on to her and she kind of steadies me if
Right,
my toe catches a crack in the sidewalk.
right. Well, probably a little bit more um, stabilizing than a cane would be too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When I was using my cane, particularly when I was running, um, I've tripped on some cracks on the sidewalks. But since I've had her for almost a year now, I've not fallen. I had a number of falls prior to having her, but I haven't fallen with her.
And you referred earlier to saying forward, so do I assume that you speak to her in English, or do you use any other language?
Yeah, we're using English, and we also use hand gestures.
What's an example of a hand gesture that you might use?
Just like here I'll stand. So like this would be forward, left, right,
Oh, okay.
stay. They're pretty
Right.
basic, hand gestures.
Do you speak and gesture, or is it either
I
or?
do both. Yeah, I do both.
And you said that you used a cane before you started working with her. Do you still use a cane at times?
Yes, I do. When I first got her, I felt like I always needed to, use her as my guide. But and I talked to my instructor about this. There are situations where, it's not really practical to have her with me, and so I've just kind of make a decision, depending on where I'm going and what I'm doing, as to whether I bring her or not. And she, like you saw, she wants to be with me, so I do feel bad when I
Right.
leave her. But there are some things that I do, particularly like for example, I volunteer at a soup kitchen, and it's really not practical to have her in a
Oh,
soup
right.
kitchen with me, um, and sometimes with social situations, if I'm don't really need her with me, if I'm just kind of be standing around talking, not really moving around much, it's easier to leave her at home.
So I'm just picturing the way she was so dejected leaving a while ago. She's gonna see you leaving with your cane, and she's gonna go hide your cane, so
And
she has to
I
go
wouldn't
with
put
you.
that past her. What she does actually is when I start getting ready, she knows, like I'm getting dressed and all, she will stay right beside me. And, and she signaling to me, I want to go with you. And she'll stay right next to me while
Right.
I'm getting ready to make sure I don't leave her behind.
If any of our listeners are thinking about if they're old enough themselves to apply for a guide dog, or if it's a parent and their child is getting close to that age, do you have any advice that you would give them?
I would just say there are a lot of guide dog schools out there is to get online and read about them and learn about them. They all have websites and have a lot of information that they share. Some of it is, depending on how far you want to go to get a guide dog, and if they have any specifications that you're interested in. Also, there are a number of social media groups about guide dogs that you can learn more, and kind of social networking. And that's really how I decided and learned about Guiding Eyes for the Blind, was because of they had the Running Guides program, and that's I found out about that through social media and some connections I've made with people who are runners and blind. And so just, take your time. And I had done this for a number of years. I knew at a certain point I would get a guide dog. So I had, been kind of gathering information for a number of years before I made the decision to get a guide dog.
Are either of your brothers using guide dogs?
No, neither one of them are. I looked at the Guiding Eyes for the Blind website to just kind of refresh my memory on some of the things. I did not realize this, but they said that only 2% of people who are blind and visually impaired use guide dogs.
Interesting. I thought it would be higher than that.
Yeah, I did too.
So if our listeners want to get in touch with you, are you on social media?
I am. I'm on Facebook.
Okay. And can we link your Facebook in the show notes?
Yeah. I'd be glad for people to contact me. I've made a lot of connections through social media and with people all over the country and the world who have vision loss, and I enjoy doing that.
So those that are listening, we'll link in the show notes the direct link to his Facebook, so that if you want to send him a message through that, you can connect with him that way. And as always, you can always send an email through the info@waterprairie.com, and we'll forward that to him as well. So if you do have specific questions for him, you can get in touch with him. So is there anything that I didn't ask, Ed, that you can think of before we go to the speed round?
No, just, I did want to just say, having gone through this experience, the amount of gratitude I have for guide dogs and these guide dog schools. It just really made a huge difference in my life. And, it's just, like I said, it's all free, and it's just amazing program. And I'm really just so thankful for Serena and the guide dog school.
I think it's incredible that they're able to get donations to cover the cost of everything, like you said.
It is very amazing. Yeah.
Because I know the cost would be prohibitive for most people.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would not have been able to afford that.
So, so those that are listening, it sounds like Ed would recommend this step when you're ready for that.
Yeah, definitely. Guide dogs aren't for everyone. As I mentioned, you asked about my brothers. They've not made that decision to do that. So some people, that's not their choice. But if you are interested, I would highly recommend it.
Well, it sounds like it's time for our speed round. And if you have not listened to an episode of the Water Prairie Chronicles before, the speed round is a list of 10 questions. And this is for you, Ed, as well as for our listeners. It's a list of 10 questions that are totally different from the interview. This is just a way to get to know our guests better. And we use it as just a fun way to close up our interviews. The first 3 questions are what I call open-ended questions. There'll be some things about his favorites. And then the last 7 questions are either-or questions. He'll choose one of 2 words or phrases. And when we get to that section, Ed, there's not a right or wrong. You can say one of the 2 that I give you, or you could say both or neither, or you can make up something else that's not in there.
Okay.
So are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So the first question, what is your favorite color?
Blue.
And what was the last book that you read?
Solely by John Grisham.
And then what's your favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
All right, so the next questions are either or. It'll be 2 words or phrases. You can pick one, pick both, or neither, or however you want to answer.
Okay.
So the first one, cake or ice cream?
Ice cream.
Batman or Superman?
Neither. I don't have a preference.
Ocean or mountains?
Mountains, definitely.
Winter or summer?
Winter.
Watch a movie or read a book?
Enjoy both.
Okay. Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Neither.
And Twitter or Instagram?
Neither.
Neither. Only because when I ask about social media, neither of those were on your list.
Right, yeah.
Well, Ed, I appreciate you coming on the show with us today and sharing what you've learned and just giving us a little more detail about what guide dogs are in general. So thank you for taking the time.
Well, I've enjoyed it, and thanks for having me.
This podcast is made possible by support from our listeners. If you want to help offset the cost of producing the Water Prairie Chronicles, become a supporter at buymeacoffee.com/waterprairie.
You've been listening to the Water Prairie Chronicles. Any resources mentioned during this episode will be posted in the description. If you're interested in joining us as a guest, contact us through the links in the description below. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. We appreciate your support as we build this resource. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week for a new episode.